The purpose of this conference is to raise concerns regarding study permit delays for graduate students from Gaza and the poor treatment of student applicants in Egypt. Today we are joined by Dania Kassim from Legal Center for Palestine and Professors Terezia, Zoric, and Allan from U of T and McGill University, respectively. Each speaker will share brief remarks, after which we will open the floor for questions. Before beginning, for members of the media, we kindly request that you email info@pssar.org with your contact information so we can share updates and follow-up materials on this important issue. PSSAR was created to provide postgraduate research students from Gaza with access to education, helping them complete applications for graduate degrees in Canadian universities, and providing other support needed to accommodate their needs during mass displacement and famine. As a professor, I have been privileged to supervise a graduate student from Gaza since January 2025. Despite the unimaginable challenges and circumstances she faced in beginning the research-intensive master's degree at the University of Toronto, while supporting her young family and adapting to a new country, she has shown excellent performance. She completed her coursework with distinction and has already made remarkable progress on her thesis research. Her performance to date is fully on par with, or even exceeds, that of many international graduate students I have supervised at the University of Toronto for the past 25 years. As an academic whose research really relies on the timely engagement and contributions of highly qualified international students, I'm very deeply concerned for my colleagues across Canada whose research programs have been slowed down while awaiting the arrival of more than 100 exceptional graduate students from Gaza. These students have earned admission to master's and PhD programs, yet they continue to face incomprehensible delays in obtaining their study permits. These delays not only disrupt the educational journeys of talented and deserving scholars, they also hinder progress in Canadian research and innovation and weaken our global competitiveness and even our reputation of Canada as a hub for attracting talented students. After almost 2 years of meetings and numerous attempts to resolve this issue of delayed study permits, a group of students in Egypt were called recently in for interviews by RCC. What we thought would be progress on their applications ended up being, unfortunately, a witch hunt. The students were aggressively interrogated, and the bias of the officers was shown throughout the questioning process. The students were asked about university affiliations and were made to feel guilty because they simply lived in Gaza, grew up in Gaza, and studied in Gaza. 11 students who graduated from Gaza's top university have expressed such bad experience. They left feeling intimidated, confused, and felt that the interview was a de facto rejection. After years of waiting and hours of interrogation, some of the students have chosen to withdraw, unfortunately, as they have lost hope in the possibility of receiving a favorable response from Canada, or at least a transparent process that they can understand. Even after the interviews, there is still no decision. Up to this point, the students are now confused, stuck, and have lost hope. As an academic at one of Canada's research-intensive universities, I'm appalled by how our government is treating incoming students and showing disregard for research advancement by many professors in Canada who have admitted those students and are waiting for them to integrate them into their research programs. Alongside my fellow academics on this stage and across the country, we are demanding that Prime Minister Carney takes a firm stance as a leader for equality and fairness for all, and to instruct the Ministers of Immigration, Public Safety, and Global Affairs to work together to resolve this issue immediately. I now invite Professor Terezia Zoric to share her remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Terezia Zoric. and I'm both a professor and president of the University of Toronto Faculty Association. The University of Toronto Faculty Association, or UTFA, represents almost 4,000 professors in downtown Toronto and on the Mississauga and Scarborough campuses. We are one of Canada's leading research universities, and our reputation is international because we collaborate and invite students and faculty from around the world. We are leading in the world because we lead with the world, and these students are part of the world with whom we wish to lead. For more than 24 months, 2 years, 130 displaced Palestinian students have been waiting for the Canadian government to process their study permits. The extensive delays have resulted in many of them losing their offers, as you just heard. Their funding has expired in some cases, and projects for professors have been delayed. Given the enormous humanitarian crisis in which they are embroiled through no fault of their own, this is just adding undue hardship on students who are already in the most difficult circumstances. For professors, these delays mean that our research is delayed, we lose out on our grants, and we take professional losses for trying to support these students. It is for this reason that the U of T Faculty Association, alongside 15 other Canadian faculty associations representing many thousands of academics, have signed a joint letter to the Prime Minister, Ministers of Immigration, Public Safety and Global Affairs regarding the outrageous delay of study permits for Gazan graduate students. We suspect that this is a deliberate double standard, and we won't stand for it. These students applied to and were admitted to extremely competitive research programs that align with Canada's research and economic interests. It is truly in everyone's interest for these students' applications to be processed expeditiously, not through delay. All of these students were top graduate students from their universities, among them valedictorians, scholarship winners, and accomplished scholars already. The University of Toronto, the 15 university faculty associations, the thousands of professors, all have an interest in responding to this dual research and humanitarian challenge. Our research programs, many of which are funded by public and institutional grants with very strict timelines, depend on the contributions of these admitted scholars. These students are set to participate in critical research across many disciplines, including artificial intelligence, sustainable infrastructure, public health, and the social sciences. The ongoing delays jeopardize project outcomes. They strain research capacity and risk the loss of allocated funding. This doesn't just undermine individual professors' research and university publications, but it undermines Canada's academic and research ecosystem and our ability to speak truthfully when we say that we do not apply double standards to Palestinian students and scholars. Alas, unlike previous crises, the IRCC has stated that biometrics waivers will not be considered for Palestinian applicants. This is a key reason why we allege a double standard. In response to other crises, Canada swiftly created academic and humanitarian programs. We have every reason to be proud of those. But for Palestinian applicants, this government has imposed requirements that are impossible given the extraordinary circumstances in Gaza, instead of adapting existing frameworks to resolve these delays. As academics and as human beings, we have a duty to advocate for and uphold integrity and equitable access to education. These are foundational principles to our institutions, principles that make Canadian academic institutions highly sought after and much respected. Not only does the exclusion of Palestinians reflect a lapse in integrity in Canadian values, but it also poses a risk to our reputation internationally. Therefore, we call on the Prime Minister and the Ministers of Immigration, Public Safety and Global Affairs to unite and take leadership, to work together to resolve these delays and address the concerning treatment of Palestinian students. Our Canadian values of justice and fairness must, in this case and in all cases, be upheld, and we have a duty to speak out when we believe that they are not being upheld. Thank you. I now invite Diana Allan to share her remarks.
Good morning. My name is Dania Allan. I'm a professor of anthropology and international development studies at McGill University, and I'm also a scholar of Palestine. For the second time, I find myself here calling on the Canadian government to expedite visas for more than 130 displaced Palestinian students in Gaza and Egypt. These are exceptional young scholars admitted on merit to programs in artificial intelligence, engineering, urban planning, neuroscience, and other highly competitive fields. They've waited for more than 2 years. I join more than 900 academics and 15 faculty associations across the country in demanding Canada stop stonewalling and process their visas. At McGill alone, 7 graduate students have been admitted from Gaza. Over the past year, I've gotten to know several quite well, including Majd Abu al-Soud, a mathematician admitted to McGill's MSc program in computer science. While in this limbo, she has continued her independent studies while teaching displaced children in Gaza. Her extraordinary faith, discipline, and hope under impossible circumstances is awe-inspiring. Students like Majd are exactly the kind of people Canada should be welcoming. They are future leaders, educators, and visionaries who will help rebuild Palestinian society after unimaginable devastation, while also contributing immeasurably to our own. Welcoming them is not charity. It upholds Canada's commitment to education, justice, and human potential. This government's discriminatory delays prevent Gazan students from safely continuing their studies, even as countries like France, Italy, and the UK process similar cases quickly and humanely. While other crises prompted flexibility, Palestinian applicants face impossible requirements and a presumption of guilt. Their futures and very lives hang in the balance. We call on Prime Minister Carney, Minister Diab, and the federal government to act urgently, process these permits immediately, and ensure Palestinians are treated with fairness, dignity, and humanity. I now call on Dania Kassim to share her remarks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dania Kassim, and I'm here on behalf of the Legal Center for Palestine. The Legal Center for Palestine is a not-for-profit organization that was launched in 2021 in Toronto by a group of lawyers, legal academics, and advocates dedicated to using the law to protect and advance Canadian rights in Canada and beyond. Today, LCP carries out its mission through legal advocacy, strategic litigation, research, and policy consultation. LCP seeks to defend the rights of Palestinians and solidarity advocates. This includes upholding the right to an education, the right to be treated equitably, the right to a fair process, and central to all this, to be free from anti-Palestinian racism, including within the immigration system. The Legal Center for Palestine is extremely concerned about the treatment of Palestinian students by the Ministry of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Palestinian students have been facing unreasonable delays and unjustified extra scrutiny, including accusatory interrogations. IRCC seems to be engaged in a pattern of anti-Palestinian racism against these students, and that is the primary concern of the LCP. The ministry has delayed the process for Palestinians, denied policy recommendations to equitably resolve the visa delays, and engaged in apparent witch hunts to try and find anything to vilify these applicants. In other words, the government seems to be engaging in a systemic pattern of discrimination against Palestinian students. A cornerstone of our legal system and our own Charter of Rights and Freedoms is the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Everyone has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, yet the ministry appears to place Palestinians under an exception. Palestinian students are seemingly being presumed guilty with little opportunity to know what they're being accused of by virtue of being Palestinian. There are two processes in particular that we are concerned about. First, IRCC delaying these students through vague and unjustified security checks. The federal court has repeatedly held that security checks cannot be relied on as a blanket justification for delay. The Ministries of Immigration and Public Safety cannot hide behind a vague excuse to string along these students. Second, refusing to provide a waiver or deferral for the biometrics requirement. Palestinian students in Gaza are stuck. They're not able to give biometrics. However, under the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, the minister may issue a public policy to grant exemptions under the Act. Under the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulation 12.8, the ministry may waive the requirement to provide biometrics where it is impossible or not feasible to collect. Gazan students are in this exact situation. They are not able to provide biometrics because the closest center for biometrics collection is in Egypt and the borders remain closed. This is a textbook case for when Regulation 12.8 should apply. We saw the government issue a biometrics exemption for Ukrainians. Yet, for Gazans, the ministry has entirely dismissed it. This leaves us wondering, why is there differential treatment between Ukrainians and Gazans? The experiences of these Palestinian students has created the overwhelming perception that there is persistent and systemic discrimination in Canada's immigration system. Being born in Gaza or currently being in Gaza should not bar high-achieving research students from reaching Canada. What these students are asking for is not extraordinary. They have a right to a fair process, free of anti-Palestinian racism, as the law demands, and it is high time the government provides it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I invite the media to ask questions.
Good morning. You mentioned bias of immigration officers. Can you tell me about any story or details about how that bias is being received?
So the type of questions that were asked about affiliations, for example, universities that they've gone to and even schools that they attended, which might have some affiliation with some political party, they were asked about, those type of questions, which we think are really very unreasonable and put the students really under undue duress.
So I asked Avi Lewis this question when he mentioned this in a question in the press conference a few weeks back, NDP leader Avi Lewis, as to why he believes these students are being delayed. He mentioned that there is an issue in Canada of systemic anti-Palestinian racism. What do you think the driver of anti-Palestinian racism is, and how is it being practiced across the immigration authorities?
I would like to take this question.
I'll say a few words.
Okay.
The classic marker of racism or discrimination is a double standard. So you've already heard today that Palestinian students are ideal candidates to get exemptions from biometrics. So here is an example where they continue to apply standard that would not be applied to other groups. Why does this occur? It appears to us that there is a bias and a presumption that Palestinians are being held to some kind of collective measure of responsibility. If you're a Palestinian student who goes to a state-run university or state-run school, and those are the only universities or school available to you, how are you being held responsible for the political party and government that is running those state schools? It appears to us that there's a lack of nuance and a lack of honesty. We're not asking for exceptional treatment. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for the same treatment and the same procedural fairness that would be accorded any other group in the same circumstances.
So just make sure you got this right, just to pick up on the witch hunt talk that's come up a couple of times.
I'm sorry, my hearing's not the best. If you could speak up.
Sorry, yeah, just make sure I'm understanding this right, just to pick up on the the witch hunt term that's been used a few times here. So essentially what you're saying is because these students attended schools in Gaza that are funded by Hamas because they are the government there, they're being told that they can't come here because of an affiliation to these Hamas-funded schools. Is that essentially the situation?
We can't conclusively say that they can't come, but the line of reasoning was explain why you went to this school does this not mean that you're affiliated with Hamas? And the students say, we went to the state-run schools. This couldn't possibly have been a political choice on our part, but that appears not to have been accepted. And the students have shared with us other lines of questioning that are all premised on the idea that you're guilty until proven innocent, with gotcha-type questions. These seem to us to be not earmarkers of the pursuit of understanding whether the students were already cleared, the students in Egypt were already cleared by the Israeli government to leave. And so there's no reason to believe that there's a Hamas connection. So we don't understand why the Canadian government is further applying these same lines of reasoning.
And just on Thursday during committee of the whole, BC NDP MP Jenny Kwan asked Minister Diab about the status of processing these visas and why the government isn't doing more to expedite the process. Minister Diab, unfortunately, her full response was cut for time, just given that the nature of that debate. But she said that she's given direction to expedite the visa processing for these students. That seems to sound like an allusion to meetings happening with students in Egypt. But then she, at the end, is audible hearing her saying that this process will be completed within the next 10 days. Have you heard anything yourselves on where things stand, like in the totality of processing the visas for students who are in Egypt or other third countries?
Yeah, thank you. We are actually told by RCC that there is no specific timeline given by the minister. So there is a directive of expediting the process, but there is no timeline. So this 10-day time frame is not confirmed.
Okay. And when did IRCC share that information with you?
It was shared today.
And so what else can you tell us about the meeting with IRCC, since I'm guessing you said most of the same things that you're saying to us, to the folks at IRCC? Like, how did that meeting go?
Generally was to understand really the process and their position, especially the situation in Egypt. Unfortunately, there were no really conclusive responses, and there were vague statements about the process. But one of the statements was about the 10-day time frame, that this is not confirmed, and this is not something that the minister had said.
Can I add a word about that? I'm less knowledgeable about this file than my colleagues on stage, but I was taken aback at the meeting to hear that the median time to process applications is normally 60 days. We need to underline, so that's the service standard in the IRCC, an 80% response rate within 60 days. It's been 24 months. In cases of exceptional crisis, you can move as quickly as 14 days. It's been 24 months. We asked whether these students would lose another academic year or whether they could have any hope of starting their studies in September. And the official said, maybe one, maybe some. We ask the question, what is the delay? Why can we not move in a matter of days, weeks, or a couple of months? Why must we be entertaining a third year? It seems to us entirely preventable and an extraordinary circumstance given what Gazan students are facing.
We just got a statement from Diab's office late last night trying to confirm what she did say in that committee of the whole meeting on Thursday. In that statement, her director of communications says that the government is working to expedite the visas for 37 Palestinian students in third countries. And she adds that several of these decisions have been finalized, but doesn't say one way or another where those decisions fell. Do you have any information on how many students, if any, have been approved to come to Canada, or how many have been rejected? And since you did allude to some have withdrawn from the process, do you have numbers on how many?
We're not aware of any student that has been given visa in that cohort. There have been conflicting statements, so we don't really have any further information beyond what we shared today.
You guys are you're calling specifically on Mark Carney to take a firm stance on this. What do you think of Carney's record on the issue of Palestine and Israel overall?
Anyone like to take this? So what we're asking is that this is a complex issue that requires the collaboration and cooperation of multiple departments. And this is not going to come except from top down, from the highest level, Prime Minister Carney, to ask for the cooperation of the different departments, IRCC, Public Safety and Global Affairs, Canada, to work together to resolve this issue. At this point, what we are trying to do is to talk to individual departments separately, but it's not working very well. So what we need from Prime Minister Carney is to give directives for those departments to work together.
Have you identified any social factors as to why, again, going back to the sentiment of whether it be anti-Palestinian racism or the double standards, any social elements, whether Canadian society organizations that are playing a role to uphold that notion overall that Palestinian students are not given the same opportunities as perhaps Ukrainians in terms of their exemptions and their exceptionary measures to get them into Canada in the first place?
You would like to take on this?
Sure.
Sure, go ahead.
I think the Canadian government has underestimated how the Canadian population views this humanitarian crisis. These are students who were top students under the most difficult circumstances. The social factors that the government ought to be reading is to understand that this is a universally or near universally supported position in the Canadian public, and they're applying a political lens that has a discriminatory bias, as if these students are somehow enemy combatants or associated with enemy combatants, when they are no such thing. These are young people who are valedictorians, researchers, university students who've already been cleared. And I think the fact of the matter is, the social factor is that the Prime Minister must read the sentiment of the Canadian people who believe in humanitarian approaches to such students. If there are other cautious voices, it's been 2 years. This is no longer in the realm of caution, it's in the realm of discrimination.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci, c'est ce qui m'a fait cette conférence de presse.
Thank you very much.